My husband's stepsister thinks that my husband loves her and has been blackmailing him for years. Now we're pressing charges. My husband's dad remarried when he was 17. His stepmom has one daughter, Jess, who was 16 at the time of the marriage. They always seemed more like friends than siblings because obviously, their parents didn't marry till they were older, but they'd sometimes refer to each other as bro and sis. Back then I sometimes got the vibe that she was flirting with him, but he never returned it, and I just brushed it off as her personality and that I was crazy because no way that would happen. Fast forward to now. We all still live in our hometown and see each other pretty often. Jess is single and hasn't had a boyfriend in several years. She and my husband are still very close. When we are all hanging out together, if we're sitting on the couch, she will sit right up against him, sometimes even put her head on his shoulder if he's showing her videos on his phone. I have always found it odd, but again, I have brushed it off. Of course, they aren't related, but it would still be too taboo and weird, so I've never fully let myself have the suspicions. However, over the last 6 months, things have been getting weirder. My husband and I's birthdays are in April and only a week apart, so over the last couple of years, we've combined them and celebrated both at the same time. We had friends and family over, and normally, we also received joint gifts. Still, this year, Jess got my husband something specific to him, fairly expensive gaming headphones and a watch, but nothing for me, and she also got him a card and wrote a decent amount in it. I didn't get to read it when we were opening things and then later on I couldn't find it. When I asked my husband where it was he brushed it off saying oh he must have accidentally thrown it out with its envelope, but the envelope was still with everything else on the counter. They've been texting a lot more, and she's also talked to me less. Sometimes, I'll see text from her pop up on his phone screen, and there will be emojis. This will be while he's holding it, and he'll unlock it pretty fast, so I've never seen what they say. If I ask her to meet up or hang out with just me, she's always busy, but if it's her coming to our home to see the both of us, she never says no. He and I have also been less intimate lately. What's pushed me over the edge is when we all got together this past July 4th. We were at my father-in-law's house for a big cookout/pool party. While in the pool, she kept hanging on him from behind, splashing him, being overly playful. I kept thinking that I was crazy because maybe after all these years, they do have a sibling-like dynamic, and she's just messing around. But I also caught her staring at me when my husband and I were close, and she looked angry. Now, cut to the worst of it all. We all were done in the pool and went inside to change. I was with my husband in his room, and right in the middle of us changing, she came in without knocking, randomly asking if she could borrow my hairbrush. My husband didn't have any clothes on. I was horrified and said something like, "Oh my god, you need to knock first." She seemed unfazed and lazily covered her eyes, saying, "Oh, whatever, he's basically like my brother." My husband seemed embarrassed, but not as much as you'd expect. She left like it was nothing. Since then, she has barely spoken to me, and I am absolutely spiraling at the thought of this. Am I being crazy? Update. I went to his dad's house that weekend, and my husband told me he was going to see him. Only my husband's car was in the driveway when I got there. I wasn't sure what to do, whether I should try calling his dad or my husband. I decided just to go in because I didn't want to play games. I walked in and heard his and Jess' voices coming from the kitchen, and it sounded like they were yelling. Even now, I couldn't tell you what they were saying. I was so full of adrenaline as I approached them that I was watching them on mute or something and not hearing what was happening. He spotted me and looked like a deer in the headlights, and all I could muster up was to say what's going on. I stared at them for a couple of seconds, and then my fight or flight kicked in. I'm very non-confrontational, so my instinct was to turn around and run. He chased after me and pulled me into a guest room to talk. Again, I asked what was going on, that he's been acting so weird and so has Jess, and point blank asked if he was cheating on me. He seemed shocked at the question but then, out of nowhere, started bawling his eyes out. I've never seen my husband cry before. He said that no, he was not cheating but had something to tell me but couldn't do it there and needed to leave / for us to go back to our house. At first, I protested and said no. I needed to know right then and there, but he still had a breakdown begging me, so I agreed. We left his car there and drove home together in mine, but I sat in silence the whole ride as he cried and was trying to collect himself. When we got home, we sat in the living room, and I once again asked him what the F was happening, and my patience had run thin. Then, out came his word vomit. He told me that in college, Jess' sophomore year after he and a bunch of our friends had gone to a party and he got drunk, our guy friends kind of ditched him to go hook up, so Jess offered him to crash on her couch for the night. He said he woke up at some point after that, with his pants down and her on top of him, having intimacy. He told me at the time he felt out of it and didn't get what was happening, and that's all he remembers was waking up and feeling it / seeing her. He then woke up again a couple hours later and she was asleep in her own bed, so he left and went back to his own dorm. He never told anyone. It took him a long time to even fully understand what had happened. He felt like he couldn't tell anybody because 1, he felt ashamed and embarrassed, 2, he didn't think anyone would believe him, 3, he didn't want to be known as the guy that slept with his stepsister, 4, he was afraid of losing me, and 5, he was worried about his dad and if he found out that it could affect or ruin his new marriage and that his dad is so happy with his stepmom. He told me he basically just acted like nothing happened, even around Jess when we all hung out together. He said he and her never spoke about it or said anything until a couple of years later when he and I got engaged after graduation. She sent him a text essentially saying she loved him and thought about that night all the time and wondered why their parents had to meet and get married if they could be together otherwise, etc. essentially. She is obsessed with him. Shamefully, I will admit that when he first told me all of this, I wasn't sure what to think or believe until I saw their text messages. I questioned him, saying if this was the case, why were they always talking? Why wouldn't he distance himself now that we're married and out of school? He told me it started up again with her about 6 months ago, when he and I told our families that we decided we wanted to try for a baby. He had a screenshot of the text she sent him the next day ranting about how he shouldn't do this. Marriages aren't permanent until a baby comes into the mix, and there's still a chance for them to be honest with their family and for him to leave me. She still loves him after all this time, etc. He replied saying he loved me and wanted to start a family with me and that he didn't love her in that way, and he never wanted her to bring this up to him ever again. That's when her demeanor changed, and she said if he didn't love her, why did he F her and what would their family think, essentially blackmailing him. I read through as many of their texts as I could handle and it was always her saying things like she was thinking about him, she wanted to see him, and she'd even send texts while we were all together telling him he looks good in that outfit. Sometimes he wouldn't reply and others he'd be trying to have a normal convo / steer it in a different direction, and sometimes just telling her to stop it. The days he's told me he's going to hang out with his dad, it's her begging him to go over there so she can see him or she will tell her mom everything. So he'd agree to go, but he swears nothing has ever happened, that one of their parents would be there a majority of the time and it would just be all of them on the patio or in the living room. That day, he went there to tell her he was sick of it and couldn't do it anymore. She could tell people whatever she wanted, but he was done. So they were yelling. I sat there taking it all in and honestly was speechless as I did not expect this. It's taken him so long to realize / come to terms with the fact that she assaulted him, and how this harassment. I cried. I felt betrayed by her and then a heavy, deep empathy for him. I just hugged him and cried, and he cried too. I told him he needed to tell his dad because we can no longer associate with her and how to manage that when she lives with him. At first, he said he couldn't because he was worried they wouldn't believe him. He also didn't want to ruin his dad's life because how could the marriage with his stepmom survive this? I told him I didn't have an answer for that. He had to trust that his dad would believe him, and I was also worried about her panicking after their argument and doing something crazy. He agreed to tell his dad and wanted to do it alone. The following weekend, he met up with dad and told him everything, showed him the texts, etc. His dad believed him, and like me, he was caught off guard and speechless. This led to him telling his wife and saying he was kicking Jess out. However, his wife did not believe it. She claims my husband must have edited the text somehow. Jess freaked out, saying none of it was true and he was the one who'd been harassing her. That's when my husband threatened to take it all to the police for an order of protection against her if she did not tell the truth, and she finally admitted to everything in an insane meltdown. His stepmom is horrified. His dad doesn't know if he can get past her not believing my husband and accusing him. We are currently in this weird limbo phase where the whole family is on edge. Jess is still living there, and his dad has demanded that she leave and has given her 2 weeks instead of kicking her out on the spot to try and salvage the situation with his wife. My husband and I are having lots of talks and trying to regroup. We've put trying for a baby on hold as he seeks therapy for this. He still is considering going to the police for the harassment. My heart is broken for him and also trying to come to terms with the truth, that Jess, who I've known for years, would do something like this. I was prepared to uncover an affair but never this.